Guys, hello. Writers Grumbly subscribes. Come on. Legend. Appreciate that. Thank you for the support. Man, I hope that was using the free Bezos Amazon Prime sub, but regardless, I adore it and appreciate it. Guys, we are here. We are alive. We are fortunate to be joined by Grumbly himself, aka Scott. How are you today, sir?
Doing great. How about you?
Man, I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Beautiful day. Weather's getting nice. You know, really can't complain. I mean, I will and do, but too fortunate to be joined by some DM prowess. Before we got on stream, Scott, you were sort of regaling me with a kind of intro OG DM scenario that we've all dealt with, aka that guy, but much less adding them later in the campaign. That can always be an interesting dynamic. But before we dive into the deposition of me pulling back the files of, you know, your tabletop history, what's going down there, what is the, like, what's sort of the speed dating, you know, brief intro of who you are, what you're about, or rather how you'd like to describe yourself to our guests that don't know you?
Well, tabletop role-playing player and DM. Live in Chicago. Been doing a lot of games just like around town with friends or at stores and stuff like that. I've got a one-pager tabletop role-playing game that is coming out. For anyone at Gen Con, if you stop by the Steve Jackson Games booth, they're putting it. It'll be part of a compilation that they're releasing.
Let's go. We'll get you to drop that in the chat, man. I want the specifics in the Discord, or, you know, in some. Heck yeah, that's rad. What's the deal with the one pager? Like, is it D20 based or?
Yeah, it's basically like a Honey Heist rule set type of game. So my wife and I were watching Bridgerton when that first came out, and it ended, and then we wanted more. So I was like, how can I get more Bridgerton? And at that time, like some other friends, a friend of mine made like another bash up of using the Honey Heist rules, and somebody else was doing like a stream of a Good Society horror version game. And I was like, wait, I could just take existing stuff and make a game out of Bridgerton. So that's what I did, and then it got picked up in Polygon, and they wrote an article about it and stuff. And I knew I had a hit when I made enough money to cover what I had spent on art.
Oh my God, what a dream!
Yeah,
that is that's
great.
bad.
So then Steve Jackson licensed it to be part of a compilation that they're doing. So that's coming out at Gen Con this year.
I cannot wait to see that come to bear. What a beautiful representation of like having an idea, or like more just enjoying art, like doing your thing, living your life, then having an idea, you know, sort of bringing it through the fire. Because fundamentally, like, I mean, even the layout alone, but then getting to the brass tacks of like, how do I get this out there, right? Like that's not easily done. So congrats on that. I can't wait to. I mean, I want the deets on that. I haven't seen all of Bridgerton, but I am, of course, aware of kind of the tone of it in the time period and its swelling popularity. At least, you know, a year and a half ago. Do you run a lot of sort of themed games in general? I mean, like, because we've talked about a couple different systems. Like, what is your kind of? Do you play 5e the most?
Yeah, I mostly play and run games in 5e, so that's kind of my default setting is 5e, and a homebrew setting as well. I think I find homebrew easier to run because I know all of the stuff.
Yeah.
I always find, like, when I'm running something like I ran Dragons of Stormwreck Isle a couple months ago, just for some friends on Twitter. I was like, hey, first 5 people to respond to this post, get into this game, and I'm going to run
sick.
one for you. So,
that's a sick way.
Yeah, so I got some people playing that, and we ran that through that when that first came out. But I always feel like things that are set in a published setting, there are a lot of people that are big fans of that setting and they know it really well. So I don't know those settings as well, so I feel like I'm not doing justice. So if like there's a character that referenced in the material, I'll bring them in, and then somebody else will be like, oh, it's Elminster, and they know all this lore about him.
Dude,
and stuff.
That's
and
hysteria.
I've heard the name, but I don't know what this do.
It's like he was meant to be a potential like ally in PC, but okay.
And I always know it's like people are like, it's your setting, you do what you want. This is your version of that character. It's like, yeah, I know that, but it's like other people like this is published material. People are familiar with it. I want to give the players that experience of like they're meeting this character that means all
Oh
this
my
stuff to
gosh.
them. And stuff.
Yeah, man. No, that's real. That's extremely real. I think I've experienced that weirdly more with art, where I'm kind of like where I'm like, I need like a satyr, or I'm looking for, a wizard that looks like this, and it will be almost like fan art of someone or something. Like I did that before with I can't remember whom exactly it was, but it's always kind of tough whenever you're going for anything and the reaction is something that was not anticipated or slightly different. Well, we'll get into sort of the homebrew versus module, because that is such a constant sort of question, and there can be a sway between the two of them. But what brought you to the tabletop? Like, was it D&D, and if so, what edition? And I'm curious what kind of like got the juice flowing.
Yeah, it was playing second edition D&D. We found out about it just like a friend of mine found the book in his house. And this was back in sixth grade. Well, no, it wouldn't have been that. It would have been no, I mean like seventh grade probably is when I first got into it. A friend of mine found the second edition book that had belonged to his brother, and he was like, "Look at this!" And he brought it over, and then I was just like enthralled by like the art and the spells and everything
Yeah,
in
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Got to play this, and so everyone was like, "Scott, figure out how to play this game, and we'll do it." So that's what we did, and it
So
stuck.
so you started as a DM.
Yeah,
Jeez Louise. It is so much harder to start as a DM. I think. I mean, because there's no reference point. It's kind of like, okay,
yeah.
well, here we go. That's hilarious. And I was just updating this chatbot, so I think I missed it. Was that 3.5 you were saying, or was that fifth?
Second edition.
It was second edition. Jeez Louise. And so was that advanced D&D or like
Yeah.
2E or what? Like
Yep. Yeah.
advanced?
AD&D second edition is what I started in. So
Got it,
I
dude.
played second edition and then came back to it when fifth edition was released.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. So fifth edition kind of brought you back. In terms of like the past couple years, I
Yeah.
mean, like you have this one page. You're like, have you played? Like I played Call of Cthulhu a fair bit, but like I'm familiar, like Orbital Blues, or I
Mhm.
mean, there's some out there that I'm Vampire the Masquerade. I've never played. Have you? You feel like you've touched on
Yeah.
a lot of different systems?
Yeah, like when I went to college, I joined the role-playing club that they had there. So that's when I got a lot of exposure to games outside of D&D. So I
Oh, sick.
played my first non-D&D role-playing game was Paranoia. So that was a lot of fun. It's like
I'm not
that
familiar with
was
that.
you're all a bunch of characters, and you're in like this. It's kind of sci-fi-ish setting, but you're basically inside this giant complex. Um, there's like a computer that controls things. Everyone's got like corporate style roles that you play. There's this myth of outside existing, but no one has ever been there. Actually, it's real.
Ah,
Um, it's pretty neat.
I like that. It's helpful to me to sample different kind of tastes of how something is run, like what the maybe different mechanics are. I mean, 5e's great or Cthulhu's great or whatever it is, but there's oftentimes something that maybe I would prefer in the other system compared to how it's done, or that I think could heighten a system like 5e that might not automatically have it. So, like, do you get to play that much? I mean, I'm hearing just like constantly about like you running games and creating them. Do you get to play? Do you enjoy being a player?
Yeah, I like DMing more, which I guess is rare,
Cool.
but I get to play a lot as well. So there's like the Chicago Role Players Guild is a new shop that opened up not long ago on the north side. So I've been playing a couple of games there. I was in a weekly game there that just ended recently. So now I'm starting to DM a new game on Saturdays with some friends for my son and one of his friends at school
Oh,
and
sick. Okay.
another friend's dads. So it's another game that's just starting off. Yeah.
And that's badass. But the one that ended at the game shop, you were running that one, or you were in that one?
Mhm.
You,
I was
you,
a player in that
you
one.
were a player in that one. Tight. Okay, good. So at least as long as you get a taste. But it sounds
Yeah.
like you prefer DMing and know that and have from the jump. So that's, a match made in heaven. Okay, cool. So
Yeah.
like you prefer, homebrew, and I mean, regardless of if I'm pulling out like Curse of Strahd or whatever it would be, I feel like there's gotta be some reskinning of a campaign to fit the characters or maybe fit like my preference. But with this homebrew, is it a whole kind of continent map, world? And so you'll bring different games into that? And if so, like what's break us off. Like what does this world look like?
Yeah. Yeah. So world building is one of my favorite parts of DMing, just like getting into that and like building all the maps. Because the reason we start with like building a whole world map. Like a lot of the advice is like if you're going to do a homebrew, just like start with the local setting, build like here's the starting town, put a couple locations around, start there, and then build outwards as things grow. Because then you have like a very deep starting area. It's very people can get really involved in it and stuff. I do the opposite, where I start with the world map and then zero in on places as we go, and that's largely because like going back to the group I was playing with, excited because they can do anything in D&D. So like, unlike a video game, it's like we can just jump on a boat, and I know you have like this castle off in the distance that we are obviously supposed to go to next, but we're going to jump on a boat and sail to the edge of the map just to see what's over there. So a lot of that nowadays that's like not cool to do, but like nobody had any idea. It was like they thought it was fun to watch me like scramble to come up with new parts of the world and new stuff. It like felt more real to them that they could go off the page and there was stuff there and they could meet characters there, and there were like stuff like adventure books and quests and stuff for them to go on. So it was pretty neat. So I always start with like the world. So like you can go anywhere you want. I throw something in front of you that you're not interested in, or something comes up that I just was like offhand mention, like there's this thing over here and that's what you want to seize on and go do, and like go off somewhere that I didn't have planned. Like you can do that. I've got stuff over there and ways to drop you into that, and there'll be some fun to have wherever you want to go.
That's beautiful, and obviously something that as a player I'm like, hell yeah. You talk about, a bunch of great points, like a bunch of like things we could tuck into, but that idea of like it not being popular to maybe sail to the edge of the map, let's say, in that scenario. It's that's an interesting kind of way to frame it, because like I of course you want to be respectful to the DM, and like hopefully there's some party synergy in terms of what people want to do as a group, maybe even including the DM. But there's also such a beauty in that autonomy, and I've found a lot of definitely like younger players, and certainly first-time players, like both younger in age and younger in experience, like typically really like crave that, and the ability to have that grounds them, in the sense of like, okay, this is a reality that like I'm really absolutely present in. I could go left, right, up, down. There's so much flexibility there. That's hilarious. That I love that they're like, just sailing like that. So whenever you're throwing down a big map, I've world built in a similar kind of fashion, and I found myself really like trying to justify elements of like the topography and maybe subsequent names or whatever. But I found myself kind of playing favorites with like the cities or the regions. Is it like walk us through what that kind of looks like if you're kind of just starting from scratch?
I kind of ended up, when I first started building like a whole world and stuff, I kind of bit off more than I could chew, because I was like, wait, it's got to be like, how big is this world? Like if they sail around, are they going to come around? Is this world flat? Will they fall off the edge? And I should have just built it like that, where it was literally a flat world that you could fall off of.
That'd be a great reveal.
Bottom of. And then there'd be like a bunch of conspiracy theorists who were like, no, the world is actually round.
I played in Scott's game.
But it was like gravity has to be right, and that's determined by the size and density of the planet. So I need to make something that's the size of Earth, which was maybe too big to start off on. But I've done it enough times now that it's like that feels like the right size. So I draw like I have a program that I use called Otherworld Mapper, which I'll just draw one big continent on it, and then you can divide up that shape into subsections and then move them. So I'll start with like, here's just a shape I'll draw, and then I'll slice it up, and those are the fault lines, and then I'll drag the map out, like how it might well add mountains to that, put rivers on, and then you look where are you in the latitude, because that'll determine where the rain's gonna fall. So
Yeah.
that's really fun from like a geology point of view, just to like build something like that and see how this planet would look. And then it's like, because it like creates it for you, where you get surprised by like, oh, there's like this huge desert here, or there's like it's set up in such a way that there's like like heavy rainfalls in certain seasons as opposed to somewhere else, and then you'll get like, what can I do as far as like plants or monsters there, and you get little like different types of adventures that you would have in certain areas and stuff like that.
I love like, you know, like the weather chart just being thrown out. You're like, I'll give you the actual 14-day forecast, Bartholomew. Here it is. You know, like that's awesome, man. I'm starting a sort of second campaign of a homebrew game, or it started as Dragon of Icespar Peak, and it was definitely set in kind of classic Faerun, but I just really was more weaving in like my themes and character backstory, and we had a great time. But now we're coming back, and in a sort of hiatus, I was straw polling, you know, the table to catch a feel for what they preferred. Like, do we want to like start in a whole new world? Do we want to maybe try another campaign, like you know, pre-made campaign? And we ended up wanting to stay in the world of this campaign that had just ended, but kind of have a big time jump. And I myself was just personally very interested in running Dark Sun, because I had actually read the 2E booklet that, shout out to Lord Richter, my guy, Bugles. Appreciate you coming through. But I mean, obviously there's a lot of it that's like really intense, and like the whole like, you know, there's a lot of like transactional human oppression, aka slavery, that's intense. There's also a lot of like, there's a lot of things I don't need, but the climate and the sort of status quo of decivilized imbalance, the sort of need to fight so hard for like base level survival in an environment like that was very compelling. And so trying to, you know, work away, obviously not that realistically, magic would be involved, but to move from Faerun, from the Sword Coast, from this rich coniferous environment to now what is more or less like high desert. And and I just wish I'd been able to pick your brain, because I obviously hand waved a lot of it with magic, but it was cool to sort of go over the high-res Sword Coast map with that sort of mind of like, what would it look like if, you know, I mean, I won't bore you with the justification, but it was cool to kind of walk through those different elements. What would be named something different? Would it remain the same? So like, you clearly have a deep like love of the worlds you build. Whenever you're moving, you know, these campaigns to campaigns, is it you starting over and creating a whole new world most of the time, or do you come back to kind of your core group of, you know, worlds that you've really felt have been successful? Like, how do you usually roll that out?
For my 5th edition campaigns, I've been running almost all of the games, all the homebrew games anyway, in the same world. So it's either like just basically like a unique instance, unconnected to anything else that's going on. Others have been like, I've had multiple groups, they're all playing in the same world at the same time. So occasionally their paths will cross, or something that
is
one
badass.
party will do in one area will affect another party when they get there, and that sort of thing.
I love that. Also very cool as a DM to like be like, all right, y'all are playing at different times, but it's one game. Like, I like that, you know?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And the players like think it's cool too, like leaving secrets for each other, or like coming in, or one party like gets to a goal first before someone else does, and then you've got like a rivalry established, but the other party has no idea that this other group was even involved. So suddenly they're being chased by this other group of players that they realize that they have just screwed over by taking some artifact for their quest that actually the other group is looking for.
Oh, I love it. That was well set up. DM. That's great. Oh man, anytime Peter and Paul both need the same coin, that's great. Oh man, I love that. So walk us through maybe like what some of prep feels like for you. I mean, if you're playing every week or like every other week. You talk about, world building from more of a macro in before before you even move into prep, like whenever you're just in the early sessions of a campaign, let's say 1 through 10, like you have the table, you've gone through your safety tools, you feel good about session 0 and character building, and now you're about to rip through some sessions. Are you ending, like, is the campaign starting with a handful of like, villain antagonists? Is there a handful of kind of ticking clocks that the party are going to be aware of? Or I guess I'm asking, if any, and not that it needs to be, are you starting with the end in mind? Does that make sense?
Yeah, sort of. I think about like when the players are thinking what characters they want to play. I also think, as the DM, what kind of villain I want to play. So if I'm gonna,
and that's devoid of what players they're playing, just how you feel.
Yeah. So I was like, I want to be a red dragon in this campaign, or I want to be a vampire this time. That's gonna be the character that I'm playing.
Go.
So I'll have usually have the characters like, create their characters, share their backstories with me. Well, like, what are they interested in? What kind of goals do they have?
How do you feel about dragons?
What past do they want to do? Yeah, that sort of thing. And then based on like all the characters, I'll try to find some like location in the world that would make sense for this group of characters to be together. And then that'll give me some like options already I have just from the world building I've done, like what's on this map at this location. Like, is it space? Do we have deserts, high mountains, whatever it's going to be? And then I'll have also like, what's going on in this region politically with like the cultures and the kingdoms that are there, with like, is the Tarask on the loose here? Because that'll give me more ideas of like what's
and real quick with that, Scott, because that's awesome and super well described. Is that happening like before session 1?
Yeah,
cool.
Usually, and I'll have a couple of like kind of like templates, because I use there's a John 4 has this idea of the 5-room dungeon. So
I've
you
heard
have
of
like
the 5-room dungeon for that phrase.
So it's basically a pattern. I use that pattern a lot for one shots. If somebody just wants me to like improvise a one shot right now, like everyone just happens to have their dice and they want to play D&D. So like, hey, can you run a one shot real quick? So just to make something up.
For anyone at home, like that is absolutely a scenario that has undoubtedly happened to Scott.
Yes.
And it has happened to myself, where I'm like, you guys all have dice on you? So that's a hilarious way to frame it. You're like, if you're ever cornered, say at, a 4th of July party, and everyone happens to have their dice.
Just happen to have my dice.
So break us off on, what's the 5-room dungeon?
Yeah, so I use the 5-room dungeon format. So there's like, how does it go? There's like an entrance, like a guardian at the dungeon entrance. Then there's a role-playing encounter, a puzzle encounter, or a riddle, or some sort of a trick. And then there's like the climactic encounter, whether that's like the final boss fight or something. And then there's like the reversal or reward, or like some big reveal at the end.
Got it.
Those are the 5 beats of the 5-room dungeon. You can mix and match those in the process. And the thing about that pattern is it like hits all the themes of play that you want to cover, and it doesn't, you don't have to take it literally. So like as the guardian, that could be a monster you have to fight. It could be somebody you have to convince to tell you something. It could be a map that you have to decipher. So there's a lot of ways to interpret like what that means. And it doesn't have to be a dungeon either. So like I use that format for all of my overland travel to make that interesting. So if somebody's going from one city out to a dungeon or to another city, rather than just being, all right, it's 5 days and we'll roll for, do you see anything on your rest? Does a random encounter happen? I'll improvise a 5-room dungeon from point A to point B, so that it draws from like what kind of characters are in this area, what kind of monsters are here.
Yeah, those might be the guardians, right?
Yeah, I try to make it like a theme, like what are they going to, like what's the challenge going to be that they're going to face on this route that they choose. It could be like I think a good example was one of my players were traveling from like this monastery off to some gate in this mountain pass, and there were paratons as a monster in this area. So I was like, oh, there's going to be these guys. So these are something that they'll see like flying around and try to either avoid, or they can try and hunt them and like collect their feathers and stuff. And there was also they went to one location that had a manticore nest, and
You love these
they didn't
hybrid
build a
beasts. I love it.
they were because they were lower level at the time, and the manticore they just kind of pissed it off, so it decided not to just fight them, but it was like harassing them. So for over the course of the adventure, whenever they out this manticore, if they went in this area, it would like come in, dive bomb them, do one attack, and then fly off.
Like urinate and leave.
They were just infuriated by this thing. They couldn't kill it. It didn't stay around long enough, and it was flying, and they couldn't fly yet. So it got one of my. I had never seen someone like the guy who was playing the sorcerer when he leveled up. He was like, I took Earthbind as one of my spells because next time we see that thing, we're pulling it to the ground and killing it.
Oh my god! And they did. Wow! Yeah. So many joyous beats in that tale, my friend. I mean, why are manticores so frequently like I think they're badass. Like the whole tail spike, obviously like flying, like a flying lion is dope, but the tail spikes make it for me. And the fact that they're listed in the stat block as speaking common is also just rad, because it does constantly, it just feels like it's begging you to create those moments of like RP, more or less, where it's like, well, actually there was 2 manticores and you killed the wife, and here we go. You know, I had a group early in Dragon of Icefire Peak more or less do that, like skin the pelt of a family member of a den of 3 manticores. And it's just funny to see how, just in general, like even whenever someone is mad at a PC, regardless of whether or not it was the rogue picking their pockets, I feel like it roots the party so firmly into the story, into the arc, into the hook that's like mid-play, regardless of like who's really at fault or to blame. That's hysterical. So
it's always great when you can get like the characters having like a personal vendetta against another creature or a bad guy, and get them to like incorporate that role play into the combat as well. So they're like swearing at each other as they're taking hits and stuff.
I think of that as almost like, you know, a groan going up and being such a like that is almost better to me than like laughter or a gasp. Like when someone is like, oh my god, this guy, be it because they're annoying and they are wandering and selling their wares, or it's the wizard's right hand man and this guy has an AC of 22, you know, or whatever it is. Like I you can tell that the investment is there. And also, Scott, I feel like really, I mean, the five room dungeon and the ability to kind of break those parts and move them sounds brilliant. Philosophically, using that over the extension of long travel, I love. I'll often either borrow from some old books and use those random tables, or create more or less like zones where certain things are more likely than others. But I love the idea of, obviously within that there's moments to like build things in specifically, like they're going to cross paths with this person or see this old ruin and perhaps conclude X. The Player's Handbook talks about the kind of 4 pillars, like, you know, exploration, role play, combat, and some version of like intrigue, puzzles. Are you tackling that session to session? Like if we're now moving from early session prep world building to session 20 to 30, like is that like how, you know what I mean? Like obviously you're following plot, you're preparing maps, whatever, but are you also really specifically tracking how much pillar goes where?
Sort of. Like when I'm planning something up, so like the upfront planning I do is like if I choose to be like I want there to be a vampire in this one or something like that, or if the players have a certain monster, like I really want to fight a beholder, I've never gotten to do that. I want to make that, so I'll take that as the villain. And then I'll take a villain's like, all right, here's what the villain is, but then what do they want? So like, what's the villain's evil plan?
Absolutely.
And then I'll use kind of like the beats of the 5-room dungeon to define like, here are the 5 things this villain wants to accomplish in order to get their ends. And then I'll have it so that the players like discover that there's this villain out here doing this thing, and then they can choose whether or not they want to engage in that or not. Because usually I'll have like one to three villains at a time in the area that they can come across and hear about like different plans, and then whichever one sticks, that's the one that will
Totally.
pursue. So it's like, what are the five things the villain needs to do? Like the players find out about it. They then the villain finds out about the players because they like upset the plans, and now the villain has to do something about it. So then I'll have like a villain strikes back scene where it's like the villain knows now he's trying to capture, he's trying to do whatever his evil plan is, and now there's this party of adventurers out here screwing it all up. What's he going to do about it? Is he going to capture someone from their backstory? Is he going to just
Yeah,
like
yeah,
directly
yeah.
attack them? Is he gonna, what's the plan there? And then, I've got like specific goals that he's trying to accomplish. So how do the players, throw that off from my plans? So like, how does the villain then adapt to what the players are doing to still like bring about the evil that they're trying to do, whatever it
Yeah,
might.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I kind of start with that, and then that like session to session is I'll just build out based on what the players have done, and then how is the villain going to react to that, and what's going to happen. So I just kind of build it out
Yeah.
from there.
And with those reactions, like that kind of either direct or indirect involvement from the party having like a ripple effect, are you, skewing more towards like just kind of your own gut of narrative storytelling? Like, well, this would probably happen, that would probably happen. Are you rolling for those things? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is there, I'm curious, like what your system of kind of if this, then that looks like.
Yeah, it's kind of just more improvised at that point. So it's based
Totally.
on because I don't know what the characters are going to do. So whatever they want to do is what we'll have to, adapt to. So like the villain has a long-term goal and then like short-term things that they're trying to accomplish to get there. So it's basically just like how have the players prevented this from happening? If not, then the villain's going to go and do this, and then the results of that happening in the world are what show up. If they're able to,
Behold.
yeah, if they're able to like the villain's after like some sort of like he's got to capture a dryad or something. If the players are able to prevent that from happening or get the dryad like move the dryad's location or something to where the villain doesn't know, then he's got to scramble and figure out what to do. So then like the
Hmm.
next thing would involve like spies or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I had one character one time. They were so the party was escorting like some princess, some Yuan Ti princess, away from uh, a mummy lord who was trying to capture her, and the mummy lord had no idea where they were hiding. So, but an artifact that the mummy lord was able to capture that the players did not prevent from happening was the Book of Nightmares, which gave the mummy
Ah.
lord the ability to go into the player's dreams or the
Oh
character's
God,
dreams.
yes.
So one of the characters had a dream that the princess was in trouble. She was being captured. So in the dream, though, the player was running to see, and I was making the player like describe like where are you running, like how are you doing this and stuff in the dream, and they were describing the location where they were hiding. And
Oh.
there was a well-known statue of a manticore at this location.
Yes, yes.
The
Finally.
and it was like where it was a famous statue in the area. So when that statue appeared in the dream, I made the dream end, and they saw the mummy saying, "I know where they are," and that's where the dream ended. So now
Oh,
they had given
dude.
up their location in the dream, and then they
I
had to either get out of there quick because now the bad guy knew where they were.
Yeah, man. What an interesting device to empower with. Like, because I thought you were going to say it was more or less a dream spell. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But this sounds like more than that. You know what I mean? Or like a fun, like, pivot on that
Yeah.
type of access to the dream world. I love that. So, what did they end up doing? Did they just bail, or did they try to, like, double time what they were trying to accomplish and then get out of there?
They stayed there. They wanted to fight. They're like, "All right, we're gonna make this our final
Bring it, Mummy
stand."
Lord.
Yeah, they like
Damn.
prepped and everything, and the Mummy Lord sent some lieutenants in, and there was a big battle in the at the inn.
Everybody's fighting mummies, but no one's fighting daddies. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I don't know what's there, but something is there. I love that, man. That's extremely. I mean, I too. I think just sort of the writer in me, the creative. Like I can't help but, want to spool out the thread that's sort of kicked left or right by the player choices. Sometimes I do, especially early on in terms of prepping and like world building, in the same way that I wanted to honor people's desire to sail to the end of the world. just because I was like, oh, it's not railroady, it's not. Oh, no, okay, yeah, whatever. But similar to that, I wanted to roll for events because I didn't want to feel like it was just my kind of whims that were impacting this. And I think that's changed a lot for me in terms of once you sort of really do establish what would motivate an NPC, a BBEG, a badass Manticore, like then I think a lot of the rolling has been done. Maybe I might roll for the success of him trying to, find that dryad on his own or whatever it would be.
Yeah.
But like, I think that's just like knowing your table and knowing the story to kind of make those decisions. I love it, man. Like, it sounds like there's so many homebrew worlds. Like, is there a villain, like a protagonist? I mean, we've talked about this Manticore, but like, that kind of stands out to you from your just tales and story building as kind of not only being fun for you to play, but one that also was highly evocative for the table.
There's been only one villain that I've used like in multiple campaigns over the years, and it was like one of the villains from my first D&D game. It was like, oh, who's going to be the bad guy of this game? And it's like, I want there to be a Lich King that's going to rise and raise an army in the world. So like a big world-ending scenario that had to be prevented, and I wanted the Lich King like tied into like the rituals and stuff around his summoning and then building the army would be linked to like calendar events. So there was kind of like this time pressure that characters would be under. So it's like by the next full moon, this is going to happen. So you have to be here by this time to defeat to prevent a ritual or whatever. But then that campaign ended before they got to the Lich King. So I was like, I really wanted to be that guy. So a couple games later, I was like, all right, I'm going to revisit this Lich King idea because I want this to happen. And again, we didn't get to the end. So I've had this guy in like 4 times now, never encountered by in any game. So
really, wait a minute. He's been in 4 games and hasn't.
Yeah.
Golly. I mean, let's call it what it is. They're scared. They're ducking him. Like, that's really the only explanation I have, is that they are on their way out. I mean, God, that does sound badass. This homebrew campaign, this were the Stargazers that I was running with my kind of home group on Tuesday, ended largely with like sort of a partial, like a PPK in a Lich's lair. Like they don't play like a Lich. It's, I mean, obviously like powerful spellcaster, but some of the lair actions are like rolling a D8 and regaining that spell slot. That's nasty. But I love that as well. Also, just mummy shout out. This is a through line I can rap about. I don't know if you're familiar with the magic beans from 5e, but it's one of my favorite, like, just random either items or magical pieces of loot. But you can plant them essentially, and different things happen. I think it's just a D100 table. But one of the options is that a sarcophagus inside a temple rises up, a pyramid from the ground, containing a mummy. And I don't know why that always has just been in the back of my mind as needing to justify. Like, I'm like, because I had a campaign that had the bag and they planted a bunch of beans. I'm like, okay, perfect. This is going to be from the hells. And it's so funny when that gets arrested, so
yeah.
I guess I'm saying I hope you get to play your Lich, because that sounds legit,
Yeah.
Well, are there any, obviously this is probably more player specific because personality, interest, investment, all those things have, such an impact. But are there any class types in D&D that you either like or don't like? And I mean, I don't mean that to like shamefully play favorites, but that you've just found either kind of harder to adjudicate or to find ways to keep it fresh. And conversely, if there's been some classes that you found really, really satisfying to play or to DM for, rather.
Yeah. I really like, well, there's a lot of different ways. Like any character that can connect to the world and the story really good is a great character, as far as I'm concerned. So from a world building perspective, like lyrics are really good for that, because then it ties in all the religion stuff that I've built for the world. So that's, I like that a lot. The one thing that I find hardest to deal with is often Artificer because
Huh.
I'm not
Yeah.
too familiar with the class and there's a lot of weird options in there. So it's it's just slower to run because I'm less sure of like, well, what ability is this that you're using right now? It's like
Artificer's weird.
yeah,
I mean,
it's
that's
got a lot of
100%.
stuff and yeah, but I wouldn't say it's like a problem class. Like I've never banned a class table or anything, but that's the one I have the hardest time with, just because it's always like it's never the same from edition to edition, and it's like I don't know, there's a
Yeah,
lot of stuff
lots of
that
little
class.
tweaks. Man, no, you're preaching to the choir there. I mean, equally that so much of what we enjoy about like DMing is a player character, right? That is like rich in terms of like who they are, even if it's just like, oh man, I can't swim and I don't eat mushrooms. You know what I mean? Like those little small idiosyncrasies are both fun to like prep for, play with, and then again just sort of root you, ground you in the world. But for some reason, I think Artificer, some of the things that they can do in terms of magically creating items or XYZ, it feels like it's, I think, justifying that in story either is like,
Yeah,
oh, it's just magic, or if you're trying to justify it, like, no, he is like analog creating these things. It's just something that like is a bit more specific than maybe a classic fighter would be.
yeah.
Uh,
The vibe is a little weird too, because it's like you're about all like your inventions, and it's more like a technology type of class, and
yeah,
the like the feeling that my world has is much more medieval in style. So there's kind of like
yes.
that. It kind
Some
of clashes a little stylistically with my faux history time.
Somebody wants to play Belle's dad, and they really just stuck with it so long. Belle from Beauty and the Beast.
Mhm.
They're like, I need a wild tinkerer inventor. Man, let's really circle in though on like when a character doesn't fit the world or the theme. I mean, obviously, we're talking about artificers in general. That's not necessarily a catch-all for every artificer to ever live or whatever. But do if you had four players and they're new players, and one of them, you get all of their character sheets, and it's,
Mhm.
Porthos and D'Artagnan and a bunch of musketeers, and then one of them is Frank. Is that
Yeah.
is that bumping you? Like, are you having a conversation with that player before? If so, like, what does that look like? You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially if you're going to be like adding someone to an existing game, like I think as a DM, I would definitely like, here's what the game is about, here's what we're doing, here's who the other characters are and everything, so they'd have some idea of like, make somebody who would fit in and get along with these guys and want to adventure for the same kind of reasons.
Yes.
We kind of got to focus like we've got a work in progress and you're going to be joining, so make a character that's cool with doing that.
Yes. No. Amen. I mean, especially with like a game that is ongoing. But how do you treat
Yeah.
that whenever it's let's just say four new players and you're starting out?
Yeah. If well, in session zero, I like to talk about like, oh, what kind of players are we doing? Because it's kind of based on what kind of game the players want to have. That's the kind of game that we should all talk about it together and just decide like, of the ideas that people are throwing out, which one do we want to be ours? So you kind of think about it in session zero and kind of come up with concepts that'll work together and make sense and that everyone can
Yeah,
do what they want, that could be fun in a setting.
that's a good session zero intention for sure, right? It's like getting everybody
Yeah.
on board and clear in terms of theme. And it might make sense in a reason why I'm just absolutely beating this horse. But in Hoylepa, good seeing you. Bugles for yet another legend that approaches. But in the situation of the three musketeers and then Frank, the because Frank can still live in this world. It's more just like, is
Yeah.
it, or like, who is Frank? Is it Sir Frank? What's going down? I in the game that I was mentioning that started last night, I didn't put it all the way together how far they wanted to take this. I thought it was more like a source inspiration. But, Frederick and Scoob were in fact Fred and excuse me, Shaggy from
Mm,
Scooby-Doo. And
yeah.
the other character is a, yeah, I won't say their name, but it's like a classic, shadow cloak. Like full
Mm,
on, and everybody's rad. We had a good time, but it was something that was odd to me because we had been talking about theme and tone. Hey, this is
yeah.
more of a high fantasy campaign, etc. And they want to reskin it, to medieval, but I can't get out of my head just the idea of going like to the Ren
Mm,
Fair and seeing the Scooby Doo crew just rocking through.
yeah.
Because like those people, are rad and funny, but it's something I know has happened, and now it's coming to bear before my very eyes.
Mhm.
So I guess I just wish I had a little bit more of the clarity and firmness you've exhibited.
Yeah.
That's
That's
why.
the one thing too is to check out like if somebody wants to just be frank in a in a Musketeers campaign, just make sure like you're going to be this character in this setting in this
Yes, exactly.
everyone else is going to be doing this. Are you cool with that? Like will you be happy playing that character here? And if so, then yeah, let's roll with it. Otherwise, it's like just as long as everyone's making an informed decision,
Yes,
it should be.
exactly, exactly. And ultimately everyone was down. I think I just had not read into how far how literal they were taking this. But totally, man. And as always, communication is typically like the solution, the answer. What's combat like for you? Is that like a big part of it? Is that sort of peripheral? Obviously, it's group to group, but I more mean
Mhm.
like you, Grifumbly. What do you enjoy? Do you enjoy running combats as a DM? I guess is the better
Yeah.
phrasing.
Yeah, it kind of depends like where it fits in like amongst the other pillars. Like if you're doing
Mm-hmm.
when I'm doing a campaign, it's usually like role playing is number one pillar, exploration is number two, and combat is number three. If I'm doing a one shot, combat is number one, exploration is number two, and role playing is number three.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on like are we in this for the long haul, then different stuff is going to be important. Where if it's a one shot, like I want to roll as many dice as possible. We're going like an hour and a half, something. So
Hurry.
then it's going to be more combat heavy. Yeah.
Yeah, man. No, I get that. I get that. And definitely, like in a long-standing campaign, you can kind of rotate through in terms of like
Mhm.
what pillar is shining. Like, what do I need more of, less of?
Right.
Have you ever? I mean, because we talked about porting over. Like, do characters die in your games? Like, have you had deaths?
Yeah, one of the things that might be a fault I have is like if something's written in a book, then I'm going to use it how it is. So since
Yeah, yeah.
there's things like there's death saving throws, so that's going to happen. There's also resurrection spells, so that's going to happen. So, the way I run my games is like your character could die in combat, but also they could be resurrected. So it depends on kind of the stakes and where you are and what level, and do you have access to
Right,
spells
right.
for resurrection or what kinds of things. And I think it adds a lot to the game. Just like my personal preference is like I like games where that's how it is.
On the table.
Because
Yeah.
that's yeah. I like doing it too, like based on what because I like world building. So like one of the things is like based on what religion you are, how does that resurrection happen, and what's the ceremony involved there, and like do you have to connect things from the player's that character's background to like bring their soul back into their body.
Mm.
Uh, 'Cause I had a character die in one campaign, and the party was like this other religion from this one area, but the person doing the resurrection was a druid. And
Cool.
in this world, the druids believed in reincarnation, where this
Cool.
other person they were from did not. So the reincarnation ritual was like they had to cover the body in clay and straw and have items that belonged to that player to bring the soul back because that player's soul was now around somewhere in the area going to be reincarnated as like a grasshopper or whatever. So they had to lure the soul back to the body. But because there was reincarnation and a whole bunch of past lives, I let the player decide like you can come back as yourself exactly how you are, or you can think what would this character's past lives have been. Were you a different class? Did you have a different skill? Were your stats somewhat different? Did you so like you
Uh-huh.
could bring something from your past life back with you because when after you're dead, you have access to all of your lives. So what
And,
do you
and,
want to come
and
back
what did
as?
they go with?
They came back as a Warforged Ranger.
Wow.
and
Warforged.
they were
Yeah,
a Goliath monk, and then switched to like totally switched race and class, and like came back, but they were still them, and like had all their memories and stuff of being like who they were, plus some past memories of like this new form that they had, that was they had lived thousands of years
yeah.
ago. So
I
it's a good place to like give the character some new things to play with, like if they didn't really like their old character or they wanted to change up for how the adventure was going and what they were after. Plus, I can give them a little lore dump from
yeah.
their past life to bring
Yeah,
to
you're like,
the
you
rest of the play.
definitely remember these 3 bullet
Yeah,
points that I'll put in a PDF for you.
exactly.
No, man, I'm with that. I love druids. Like, I think I enjoy playing them. I enjoy DMing for them. Like, I think there's so many elements mechanically that make it really rich in terms of lore and role play and plot
Hmm.
action. But just the reincarnate spell, is
Yeah,
I think it changed in Tasha's, but like there weren't a lot of. I think that was the first resurrection spell a druid gains access to because they don't have revivify, or they didn't before Tasha's.
hmm,
And the reincarnate spell is inherently so fun in the sense of, just that. Like, what would it be to take a soul to bring it back through? If you're actually going to roll on the table for like, the race type, that's also can be fun.
hmm.
But I love, of course, consulting the player and being like, what would this,
Yeah.
could you pull more from your own backstory while also opening it up to me to be able to fill you in with some lore bullets? That's sick.
Hmm.
I love that.
Yeah, and I like it too when like the lore of the world or like choices you've made around like your class or whatever, like if you're a cleric of one religion or a druid, like what does that mean as far as like the beliefs of that
Mm.
character, the world setting, and then how might that affect the mechanics? So like one of the things that I do in the campaign I just started running for my son and his friends, they're in an area of the world, and the religion there are two gods, the living god and the dead god,
Ah.
and one of their domains are rivers, and this is a symbol of the passage of life to death and the natural cycle of that order.
Ah.
So undead, though, break that cycle. So in this world, undead can't cross running water because it's
Mm.
prevented by the. It's they take damage if they try to do that. But in other worlds, that's not. In other areas that are dominated by a different major religion, where those gods
Oh.
hold, that's not a case. So depending on what they're doing, like they may counter a horde of zombies coming at them in this area, they can just cross the river because the zombies won't be able to come after them. But if they go like
Yeah.
over the mountain range to other religions' gods are dominant, that's not going to save them.
Oh, dude, I love the idea of like, quick, boys, across the river. It's like, oh shit,
Yeah,
we're in Kansas, not Missouri. Like that's awesome. Like, and what a great way to play with
yeah,
geography to affect that. Man, I love that. It sounds like the gods have, a really, I don't necessarily large, but like a really fun and specific influence in your worlds. Like, is that
yeah.
kind of going back to, the world building session 0? Is that just, in step with whenever you're building out the regional politics? Like, is it just sort of
Yeah.
foundational like that?
Yeah, I did that on purpose because I created like most of these religions after I had just got done playing in an Eberron game. So like the gods were very absent in Eberron compared to what I want to do is like what would it look like if we had multiple gods that were more active in doing stuff, and like I used the because of like Theros the Theros book had come out
I'm not
recently
familiar with
too.
that.
So
What's Theros?
oh yeah, Mythic Odysseys of Theros. It's a campaign source book, but it's got a whole bunch of like
Oh,
if you want to run like a Greek mythology style of a game. But there's a set of rules in there called piety. So as you do things that are aligned with what your god's domain is, what the value, that you can gain different boons that like different things that will boost your character, give you like little one-off abilities or like advantage on things or
love
other
a
stuff
good
like that.
boon.
So yeah, I like using the piety rules in there too, and also like making it affect different spells because different pantheons have different ideas of what good and evil are. So if you cast protection from good or evil, that's going to mean different things based on where you are because that god holds sway there. So divine magic works the way that god wants it to.
That's such a like you really, because it's hard to always wait in like the effects of a location outside of what monsters are there and what's the weather like.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So I do like giving giving a locality to the god's impact is such a like fun way to play with that. In with Dark Sun, I'm seeing a lot of room for that, even in the areas, the overwhelming areas that are just devoid of any divine presence. That's rad, man. In this, I mean, just because like you've given us so many gems from your own, kind of catalog. I know we didn't get to the Lich. Is there like are there, do you think of, one or two, either like BBEGs that you did get to play that were really fun in combat, or like one or two kind of not campaigns, more or less environments or geographical regions that really like just came to bear in a way that were satisfying for you, the DM?
Yeah, well, I guess like one of my favorite monsters to run in combat is a Hydra. I love a good Hydra fight because you've got like you got all these heads doing things, and the players have this specific challenge where it's like they don't just have to kill the thing. There's like specific criteria in order to make it be dead finally. And they can take actions that are like trying to kill it, but then they just make it worse because now there's additional heads, or they can't stop its regeneration. So they have to, you have to be more tactical and stuff. So there's a lot of like the players have to cooperate and like know what they're doing, come up with a plan. They can't just like I'm just swinging and I hit or miss, and then it's somebody else's turn.
Yeah, I'm gonna DPS this thing. Fight. Yeah, that is awesome, and it's also, I think, very realistic and thus very kind of satisfying for everyone at the table. But to have to figure out those specifics of like, oh shit, this troll regenerates, or like, oh wow, like it's vulnerable to fire, or, like that real world need to uncover tactics is, I think, super fun, and kind of like built into some of the mechanics of, know thy enemy for a fighter. It kind of can give a greater value to somebody that can either infer or wants to sneak up and try to get some insight on a group of potential foes. Hydra's great. Yeah, Hydra's fun. I've never run a Hydra, so I'm kind of sitting here like a sand Hydra in Dark Sun, perhaps. And how about like, I mean, you've told us some great ones, but is there one kind of region geographically where you're like, the lore, the weather, and the terrain really came together and got them?
One of the things I really like building is just like the cultures of the area there, because I did my undergrad in sociology, so like the culture building stuff is something that's
what a great really background fun to play into that. Of course, like that is, I can see why you would enjoy that. It's awesome.
Yeah, so like thinking about like, all right, here's the people who are here. Like, are they primarily like elves, orcs, and humans all live together here, and they have the same culture. So here's like what they're, and like, so what would their food be? What would their, what do they make their clothes out of? What's their architecture like? And that all come from like, well, what's the climate here?
What's
like,
the vibe?
Whether cold or warm? What kind of stuff would grow in this area? And then like, what would their values be from the religion? So one of the things I like to do is like mix and match things with like, there's a religion in this area. This culture is like, has totally different values that they are interested in. They like live totally differently than this one across the way, but they're the same religion. So how does that change their festivals or whatever? So it's like a lot of little role-playing things in there, and like background things that can make your character more interesting. And one of the ways, like, I like to see when players start picking up on this kind of stuff and then using it to their advantage in the game.
Totally.
Because there was one where I had some players, they were trying to talk to some NPC, and an assassin was able to beat them to the location and kill the NPC, but they caught the assassin running away, and they were like, wait, we're in this region. Like they were asking me questions about like, how is this assassin dressed? Because they knew like the country across the mountain. Like they all had like this specific jewelry and stuff they were wearing. So they were like, is this guy like from here, or is he from the other kingdom across the way? So like they were picking up on like the cultural cues of how these people dressed to know like whose side the assassin was on.
Oh, dude, that is great.
That was fun.
Yeah, and like it is so satisfying whenever like your own lore comes back and is not only like referenced but is a linchpin in it. That's that's sick, man. Yeah, it's really, and I think also that's I mean, I assume you probably read fantasy, but I think that's what really can ground me into any world, is a sense of that realism of, you know, local and kind of state culture, or however you want to kind of reference the lines that are being drawn to group a space or a people. Yeah, man, I love that. I just like, there's so many different, you know, like tables we've referenced that you're running. So that's why I'm kind of like you know, I just wish I could envision it, because that does sound like such a great time. You're like, it was the table that had also been doing this and this. So they were kind of on my shit list, but then they caught the assassin and they found it back. You, and we're about to get into the rapid fire, guys. Relax. You will get it. But only because it was sort of, we briefly talked about this kind of before the stream, but have you ever brought in, like purposefully, have you ever brought in someone else, like a friend, another DM, whatever, to play like a villain, or to play a role in your campaign as a one-off? Is that something you've ever kind of explored?
No, I thought about that. I haven't actually done that though. So I've never done a co-DM session. And there's been a few people like at times where I thought like, oh, if I could have this person like who did play a character or something. Like I've had characters before, like as their story arc, that where they like embraced evil and ended up like going off somewhere else and leaving the party, and then that player came back with a new character later on because like their that arc had ended for their other. It's like I want to bring that character back at some point as a villain, but I've never been able to do that before.
That's in that scenario. Would you ask the player to man the now evil NPC?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's sick. That's interesting. I think part of it is like a lot of my circle are actors, you know, and artists and whatnot. But you know, unfortunately, no. I asked a dear friend of mine to basically pop on and play one of like the lead henchmen of a group that they had been kind of tracking and facing, and it was really. It was kind of one of those grown moments, you know, of we were playing on Zoom, and this is Brandon. He's been on the stream a bit. He's a great dude. But him sort of zooming in was extremely jarring for people. I mean, I had prefaced it. Half the table knew him directly or indirectly. All of them knew him indirectly. But it also, like, it was very fun for me for that reason. He did a great job. I gave him like a one-pager and, you know, some quips, some dialogue, like that kind of vibe. But it also took a ton of pressure off me, where I was like, here's your stat sheet, here's the thing, you know, like, go get him, you know?
Yeah.
And of course I wanted to have a talk with him beforehand to be like, if you do knock them unconscious, this, if you get below 15 hit points, that, you know, whatever it would be. So yeah, I feel like you would execute that really well because of how tactfully you set up the beats of your story. I think that's kind of the main reason I asked. And it's great. Yeah. It's very, very great whenever people know each other, like maybe in that kind of that multiple games that you're running in one world has a ton of potential for that.
I think that's a really good idea, though, that mentioned that you had like a prep sheet for them. It's like, if this happens, do this and this. So like they can be set up to, you know, what is this character about, and what's the, you know, what are the encounter options that are likely to go.
Well, because it feels like half the time they end up capturing somebody and just berating the hell out of them. You know what I mean? Where it's like, bring out the book of war crimes. Like, we're gonna get after this. And so I definitely want them, you know, especially he's like a great actor improviser, but it's like, you know, just like any early stage or late stage prep, to get in the head of like the motivation and thus the dialogue or the choices is like so much of the fun. Last question, I promise. Well, other than whenever I asked you like 3 dozen in a second for rapid fire, but like with dialogue or with role play, are you? I mean, obviously you would prep it how you prep it, but are you more concerned with like story beats? Are you liking to put down actual dialogue? You know what I mean? Like, how do you how would you prep a role play encounter? I guess, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I usually have the character defined, like who they are and what one of the things I like about being a dungeon master is that I can play a whole bunch of characters. I can play all
Sure.
of the other characters in the world, so that's a lot of fun. Because like I have a lot of friends who are actors too that play in my games,
Condolences.
and yeah, no, they're great because I like the investment that folks put into their characters, and I've done a lot of like Second City and
Oh,
Improv
sick.
Olympic here Chicago and stuff too. So it's like that's where like my core friends when I first moved here were from, and we started playing together. But it's like when I'm thinking about the like character dialogue or something, I usually I always try to specifically avoid writing two NPCs talking to each other
Totally.
because then I feel like that's very boring for I feel awkward doing it, just like having a conversation
It's
with
hard to
myself,
do,
two different perspectives,
technically,
and then like the players are if they're like listening so I usually like in that scenario when that does need to happen, I'll just like summarize like what's going on. It'll be like the king and
Yes.
his advisor talk about this, and then this is what they decide. So
Yes,
I'll just
yes,
kind of
yes.
cut to the chase on that. So otherwise, it's like here's who the character is, here's what they're about. I might have a few lines written.
That's
Actually,
wise.
when I there'll be the most I think lines I've ever written is if there was a Kenku character I had, and
That's
Kenku's only talk from mimicry. So there were lines specifically that I had like a soundboard basically that these are the lines this guy can say, and I
I
have to
love it.
only use lines for communicating. But some of the I did also left a few clues in there because some of the lines there was like an
Ah,
advisor, this Grand Duke that was supposedly helping the party out, and then this Kenku who was like a spy and assassin who was like one of the henchmen for the big bad guy. Some of the phrases that the Kenku knew were from this guy, and he would say them in his voice, and they were like, "Wait,
oh,
I
let's
know this
go.
like this catchphrase that
Let's
this
go.
guy had in his voice, and like he's talking to this guy, and that was like their clue that the guy that they thought was their friend was actually betraying them.
Dude, that is amazing. And I love setting it up on the soundboard to not only make it consistent, but like easier and kind of encourage you to use it. Like that is great. And that's why I ask, guys. All right. All of you that were like, hey, it's time. It's time. What is time is to block this dude who is asking me to buy viewers. Excuse me while I ban him. You have been banned. That is a great answer and one that is super actionable and helpful. I love that. I've never like run out of a Kinku. Kinku
Yeah,
soundboard is kind of an amazing idea. Sage, my prince, a bugle for thy and thy children. I completely agree. Um, I have ran some bird PCs that I wanted to run into the ground or into traffic, but I've never trotted out a Kinku that has a tactical
yeah.
parroting ability like that. Sage, I hope you're well. Okay, guys, you know what the deal is. I don't want it any more than you do. It's in his contract. We have to. Grifumbly. Grifumbly, my boy. Welcome to the nightmare. That
All
is
right.
the rapid fire. Now, before we get too panicked, it is essentially a sequence of yes, no questions, binary choices that I'm going to pepper you with. There's no wrong answer here. Okay, except for one question, which you can choose which one that is. But have a blast. Answer from your heart. I'm excited to hear anything you want to say or ask before we dive into the rapid fire.
No, let's do it.
Okay, character creation. Standard array, point buy, 4d6 drop lowest, or 3d6.
Standard array.
Standard array, okay, my prince. You prefer DM or GM?
DM.
Table snacks, sweet or savory?
Sweet.
You like the Fey Realm or the Plane of Nine Hells?
Fate realm.
If someone attempts to sleight of hand one of your players, do you give the player a perception check or use their passive perception?
Perception check.
Okay, generous. Wizard or sorcerer?
Wizard.
Cleric or warlock?
Cleric.
Fighter or paladin?
Paladin.
Should have known. Druid or ranger?
Druid.
Okay. Vampires or werewolves?
Vampires.
Red dragon or blue dragon?
Red dragon.
If you're playing one for the rest of your life, are you playing a spellcaster or a melee character?
Spellcaster.
Okay. D100 or D12?
D100.
D100? Saucy. I didn't anticipate that. Produce flame or firebolt?
Firebolt.
Mending or spare the dying?
Mending.
Wow, respect. Guidance or mage hand?
Guidance.
Mass suggestion or power word stun?
Mass suggestion.
Sick. Me too. I love it. Okay. A cleric, a bard, and a warlock all walk into a dungeon. Which one walks out?
The bard.
The bard. I love it. How does he look when he walks out?
Better than he went in.
What do you find more annoying, a rules lawyer or a power gamer?
Rules lawyer.
A rules lawyer. Okay. More annoying, stunning strike or silvery barbs?
Silvery barbs.
Interesting. Stunning strike tests me. They needs a size limit, dude. Either way. Scarier thing to encounter in a dungeon, a small boy that's lost and somehow immaculately clean, or an old woman wearing rags that won't stop laughing?
Small boy.
And why's that?
It's creepy. How'd he get in there? Why is he so clean?
Why are you so clean in here, boy? Okay.
Does he live down here? This is his house?
Does he have lair actions down here? Better BBEG, a level 20 wizard or a level 20 warlock?
Level 20 warlock.
Ooh, okay. Final question, yes or no. Should cats have dark vision?
Yes.
Agreed. What the heck is
They
going on?
do in the new Monster
Do
Manual.
they?
Yes,
Oh, they've
they
updated
fixed
it. Thank God. Well, it looks like I need to update my questions since they have pulled that off the board. But I'm glad to see that they heard me. They heard our cries. Guys, give it up. It's our boy. We got Grifumbly in the house. He did it. You're the man, dude. Appreciate you coming through. Like, you're a killer. Like, I would love to be at your table, and people at your table, I feel like, are very, very fortunate because you have a great grasp on what you're doing, and you're excellent to be around. But you have so much thoughtfulness in terms of where this world building is coming from and some of the trickle down and trickle up that, subsequently comes. So, tip of the cap.
Hope we can play together sometime.
Yeah, no joke. I mean, seriously, man, like if you ever, as I was doing it, I was like, oh, this is going to end up just me like pitching to Scott. But if you ever, need someone to come in to be, a goblin that's about to get stabbed, but tell them a piece of information or whatever, would love to. Would be a treat and a blast.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I feel like I owe you one. We need to do a between 2DMs one shot sometime. I agree. We've had some absolute hitters. Maybe for my streamiversary or something like that. Who knows? Guys, give it up for Scott. You're a legend, dude. Do you want to drop in the chat the one pager, or how can people stay in touch? How can we support you down the line?
Just go to you can find me as Grifumbly on Threads, and I got all my links to my stuff on there.
Okay, you heard him. Grifumbly on Threads. And he has his links on there, guys. So go there and check out the darn links. Scott, you're the man. I do always like to end these streams by rating someone else that is doing some D&D stuff. So guys, stick around just to say hi. Give them a smooch. The very first time I did D&D prep, I was rated. And, after the shock and the fear wore off, I felt really grateful. I was like, oh, sweet. Somebody came through. How great of them. So that can be us. That's going to be us. Do you know anyone that's streaming right now by any chance? We're going to stream Alex Baum, who is chit-chatting about Dungeons & Dragons. This is it. Guys, smoochos. In a moment, we're going to raid this person and send them all the support and love that we have until you need to go do something else. In which case, that's totally fine. Before we get out of here, Scott, any final words? Any sage counsel that you have for us?
No, thanks for having me. See you guys at the gaming table.
Appreciate you being here, man. And likewise, see you guys there. We